I opened my front door and found my daughter-in-law standing on my porch with 4 suitcases and a grin like she'd already won. "We heard you bought that stunning Aspen villa, so we're moving in," she said, pushing past me before I could even say hello. She made it exactly 1 step into my living room before her face went white as snow, because she had no idea what she just walked into. And by the end of this story, neither will you see it coming. Hi, I'm Margaret. I'm 73 years old. And if this is your first time here, welcome. If you enjoy stories about ordinary grandmothers who don't let anyone walk all over them, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. Now, let me tell you exactly how my daughter-in-law's greed became the best thing that ever happened to my peace of mind. My son's name is Ethan. He's 38 now, though in my heart he's still the skinny boy who used to fall asleep in my lap during Sunday movies. 6 years ago he married a woman named Brooke, and I tried, Lord knows I tried, to love her the way I loved him. But some people make it very hard to love them. Brooke was beautiful, sharp-tongued, and had a way of looking at my house, my furniture, even my late husband's old recliner, like she was pricing it all for an estate sale. Frank, my husband, passed 11 years ago from a heart attack that took him in his sleep, quiet as he'd lived his whole life. He left me a modest but comfortable pension, a paid-off house in Ohio, and a habit of saving every spare dollar for a rainy day, as he used to say. What Brooke never understood is that Frank and I didn't save because we were cheap. We saved because we'd both grown up poor, and we knew what it felt like to not have a cushion when life knocked you down. So for 40 years we tucked money away quietly. We never talked about numbers at family dinners. We never bragged. We just lived simply and let our savings grow in the background like a garden nobody bothered to look at. Brooke, on the other hand, talked about money constantly. Not earning it, spending it. Every holiday dinner became a runway for her latest handbag, or her opinions about old-fashioned furniture that needed replacing. She'd walk through my house rearranging things without asking, sighing loudly at my outdated kitchen, telling me I should really think about renovating before it's too late, which I always understood to mean before I died and it became someone else's problem, namely hers. I bit my tongue more times than I can count. Ethan is my only child, and I wanted grandchildren in my life, wanted holidays that didn't end in tears, wanted to believe that underneath the entitlement there was a woman who genuinely loved my son. For years I told myself that. I told myself a lot of things. Then 8 months ago everything changed. A cousin of Frank's passed away without children of her own, and to my complete shock, left me a small fortune, along with a share in a family property investment none of us knew existed. It wasn't life-changing in the sense of buying yachts, but it was more than enough. And with it, I did something I had dreamed about since I was a young bride flipping through travel magazines. I bought a villa in Aspen. Not a mansion. Not something absurd. Just a beautiful, quiet 4-bedroom home with a view of the mountains that made me cry the first time I stood on the back deck. I told exactly 3 people, my lawyer, my best friend Carol, and eventually Ethan. I told him quietly, over coffee, and asked him, begged him really, not to tell Brooke yet, because I wanted time to enjoy it before it became a topic of discussion, negotiation, or expectation. He told her within 48 hours. Which brings us back to that morning. Brooke didn't call. She didn't text. She showed up at my actual front door. My house in Ohio, not even the villa itself, with 4 suitcases, sunglasses pushed up into her hair like she was arriving for a photo shoot, and announced that they were moving in. I stood there blinking at her, genuinely confused. Moving in where, dear? The villa, obviously, she said, already wheeling a suitcase past me into my hallway. Ethan told me everything. God, Margaret, why didn't you say something sooner? We've been living in that cramped townhouse for years. The kids need space. Lily needs her own room. Noah needs a yard that isn't the size of a napkin. This is perfect timing. I want you to understand something. I love my grandchildren, Lily and Noah, more than almost anything on this earth. If Brooke had come to me and said, Margaret, would you ever consider letting us stay at the villa sometimes? We'd love to bring the kids. I would have said yes in about 4 seconds. I might have even offered it myself eventually, once I'd had my time to enjoy it. But that is not what happened. What happened is she walked into my home like a general taking a city, informed me of a decision that had apparently already been made without me, and expected me to simply hand over the keys. Brooke, I said carefully, the villa isn't really set up for. We'll make it work, she interrupted, already texting someone, probably a moving company. Honestly, it's kind of silly for you to have all that space to yourself. What are you even going to do out there alone? You don't ski. You don't hike. It makes way more sense for a young family to be there full time, and you can just visit whenever. There it was. The plan laid bare, delivered with the confidence of someone who had clearly rehearsed it in the car. My villa, my sanctuary, the one thing I had bought entirely for myself after 50 years of putting everyone else first, was to become her full-time residence, and I would become a guest in my own dream, visiting on her terms. I looked past her toward the driveway, and that's when I saw the moving truck. Not a small one. A large one, already half-loaded with furniture, boxes, and what looked suspiciously like Lily's entire bedroom set. You've already started packing, I said slowly. Well, yeah, Brooke said like it was obvious. Ethan said it was basically settled. I felt something in my chest tighten. Not quite anger yet, more like the cold, clear feeling you get right before a storm breaks. But I didn't raise my voice. I've learned, at 73, that the loudest reaction is rarely the smartest one. Come in, I said instead, stepping aside. Let's talk about this properly. Brooke swept past me triumphantly, already mentally redecorating my life. But she made it exactly one step past the threshold before she stopped cold. Her eyes had landed on the man sitting quietly at my kitchen table with a leather folder open in front of him, a man I'd invited over an hour earlier, before she'd ever texted me she was coming, though of course she didn't know that. Who's that? She asked, her voice suddenly a half octave higher. This, I said pleasantly, is Mr. Whitfield. My attorney. I watched the color actually drain from her face. Not metaphorically, I mean her skin went visibly pale, the way it does when the body understands something before the brain has fully caught up. You see, what Brooke didn't know, what nobody but Carol and Mr. Whitfield knew, is that I hadn't just bought the Aspen villa on a whim. In the 8 months since Frank's cousin left me that inheritance, I had been quietly, methodically restructuring my entire estate. Not because I expected trouble. I did it because a good friend of mine, Carol, had gone through something devastating 2 years earlier. Her own daughter-in-law had convinced her son to have her declared unfit to manage her finances, all so they could get their hands on her house before she'd even passed. Carol fought it and won, but it cost her 2 years of her life and nearly her relationship with her son forever. Watching what Carol went through changed something in me. It made me realize that loving your family and protecting yourself from your family are not contradictions. Sometimes they're both necessary at the exact same time. So when I inherited that money, I didn't just buy a villa and leave the rest to chance. I sat down with Mr. Whitfield and we built something airtight. The villa was placed into a trust, not a family trust, not something with Ethan's name anywhere on it, but a trust with very specific, very deliberate terms. Terms that, as it turned out, I would need far sooner than I expected. We were just finalizing some paperwork, I told Brooke, gesturing for her to sit. Actually, your timing is perfect. There's something in here that concerns you directly. Ethan arrived about 10 minutes later. Brooke had apparently texted him in a panic the moment she saw the lawyer, looking sheepish and refusing to meet my eyes, which told me everything about how much he'd known and how little he'd bothered to tell me he'd shared it. Mom, what's going on? He asked. Sit down, both of you, I said. I want to explain something, and I want you to actually listen this time instead of assuming and packing moving trucks. Mr. Whitfield slid 2 copies of a document across the table. I watched Brooke's eyes scan the page hungrily, looking for her name, looking for square footage, looking for anything she could claim. Her face fell further with every line. The villa, I said, is held in an irrevocable trust. I am the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. The trust does specify what happens to the property after I'm gone, but it does not grant residency rights, usage rights, or decision-making authority to anyone, for any reason while I am alive. That includes you, Brooke. That includes you too, Ethan, as much as it pains me to say it in front of you. But Ethan said, Brooke started. Ethan doesn't own the villa, I said, cutting her off gently but firmly. I do. And I bought it at 73 years old using money that came to me for myself because for the first time in my entire adult life, I wanted something that was purely mine. Not shared. Not inherited early by someone impatient for me to either hand it over or pass away. Mine. The silence in that kitchen was the loudest silence I've ever heard. You can't be serious, Brooke finally said, her voice climbing. We already told the landlord we're breaking our lease. We have a truck outside. Do you know how much money we've already spent? I know nothing about that, I said calmly, because nobody asked me before doing it. This is insane, she snapped, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Ethan, say something. And here's the part of this story I'm proudest of. The part one want every grandmother watching this to hold on to. Ethan looked at his wife, then looked at me, and for the first time in years he actually said something honest. Brooke, we talked about this. I told you we needed to ask Mom properly, not just show up. You told me it was basically decided. I told you I'd bring it up, he said, his voice tight. You told me you already called the moving company before I even finished the sentence. I want to be clear. I wasn't gloating watching my son and his wife unravel in my kitchen. It genuinely broke my heart a little. But it also confirmed something I'd suspected for a long time. Brooke didn't listen because she didn't need to. She'd learned that if she moved fast enough and acted confident enough, people simply got swept along, myself included, for years. Not that day. Mr. Whitfield, ever the professional, cleared his throat and continued. There's one more provision Margaret asked me to include, given some recent conversations she and I have had. He turned the page. The trust included a clause, one I had specifically requested after a very telling phone call with Ethan 2 months earlier, a call where he'd mentioned, almost in passing, that Brooke had already started looking up Aspen private schools just in case. That single sentence had told me everything I needed to know about how settled this plan already was in her mind, long before I'd said a single word about sharing the villa. The clause stated that if any family member attempted to occupy, claim usage of, or exert pressure regarding the property without my explicit written consent, that individual would be permanently excluded as a beneficiary of that specific asset in the eventual distribution of my estate, regardless of any other provisions elsewhere in my will. In plain English, Brooke had just watched herself get written out of any future claim to the one property she wanted most in real time, because of the exact behavior that made me protected in the first place. You can't do that, she whispered. I already did, I said. 3 weeks ago, actually. Today just happened to be the day you found out. Part 6. The quiet after the storm. Brooke left that afternoon. She didn't storm out dramatically the way she'd stormed in. She left quietly, which somehow felt more damning than if she'd screamed. The moving truck sat in my driveway for another 2 hours while, I assume, several very uncomfortable phone calls were made to landlords and moving companies to undo whatever had already been set in motion. Ethan stayed behind after she left. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where he used to do his homework as a boy, and he looked older than I'd ever seen him look. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. I should have stopped this before it got here. You should have, I agreed, because I don't believe in pretending things are fine when they aren't, not even with my own son. But I'm not interested in punishing you for the rest of your life over one afternoon. I'm interested in whether things actually change from here. We talked for a long time that day. Really talked in a way we hadn't in years. I told him about Carol, about what she went through, about why I'd made the choices I made. I told him that loving Brooke's children, my grandchildren, didn't mean I owed their mother my home, my savings, or my say in my own life before I was even gone. He asked quietly if the villa invitation was permanently off the table. No, I said. But it's mine to offer on my terms when I'm ready. Not something to be claimed. Part 7. 1 year later. It's been just over a year since that day. Brooke and I have what I'd call a cautious peace. Not warm but civil, and honestly, at this point in my life, civil is more than enough. She hasn't mentioned the villa once since, which tells me she finally understood the message, even if it took a moving truck sitting empty in my driveway to teach it to her. Last summer I invited Ethan, Brooke, and the kids to stay at the villa for 1 week. My invitation, my dates, my rules. Lily built a blanket fort in the living room and declared it the best house in the whole world. And for a moment, watching her tiny face light up in front of that mountain view, I remembered exactly why I bought the place to begin with. Not to prove a point. Not to punish anyone. Just to finally have something at 73 years old that was entirely unapologetically mine to protect and mine to share only when I chose to. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with an old woman's story. If it meant something to you, please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I truly love reading every single one. And if there's a Brooke in your own life, I hope this story reminded you of something important. The home you built, the money you saved, the life you earned. None of it needs anyone else's permission to remain yours. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.